Yo, Eddie.
Yes, Rolando?
Happy Pride. How you doing?
Happy Pride.
How did we celebrate Pride?
We were in Cape Cod.
We were in Cape Cod. We did hit the tail end of New York City Pride. And
Yes,
it was a little,
that was crazy.
I've never been to Pride so late, so it was a little jarring for sure.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people, certain spots.
But everybody, happy Pride. Yes, we're wrapping up Pride Month. And unfortunately, Nicole is not with us, so she has no pride. LOL, just kidding. But I'm very happy to be able to have this episode with Eddie because we also will be joined by two very special guests, Kyle Getz and Mike Johnson of the podcast Gayish. If you guys haven't heard this podcast, it is a very, very excellent podcast that really breaks down gay stereotypes. So I'm very, very happy to have them on because we're going to be covering probably one of our gayest topics that we've covered since the dawning of this podcast. Eddie, what are we covering?
The phenomenal, the controversial, the historical, Queer as Folk.
That's right. We are covering Queer as Folk. 3 iterations of these stories. And you know what? Nicole's not here. So as I told my guests, it's like when the kitty is away, the mice will play. So we're going to do this Rolando style, which means it's going to be all over the place, guys. So just be ready for a wild ride. I'm Rolando.
And I'm Eddie Z.
And this is Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals.
An original podcast
about unoriginality.
Yeah, big time.
We are joined today by Mike Johnson and Kyle Getz of the Gayish podcast. Let me give you guys a little bit info about them. Kyle Getz goes by he, they, is a podcaster, writer, and filmmaker. In addition to being a host of Gayish, his poetry chapbook, Gays Don't Poop, was published by Gayo. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
Okay, in 2021, and he released a documentary chronicling his intimate struggles with depression and self-harm. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us. And Mike Johnson goes by he, him. He's a podcaster, musician, and software engineer. In his spare time, he volunteers for his fraternity, is a board game fanatic, and loves all things Star Trek. My husband, too, loves all things Star Trek. What's your opinions on the new
Strange
Star
Worlds?
Trek?
Yeah, look, all Star Trek is good Star Trek. Period.
Yeah,
right?
Like French fries.
Yeah, I will love all of it till the day I die. Do I have my criticisms? Absolutely. And Strange New Worlds is great. It's amazing.
Yes.
I've caught bits and pieces here and there when he watches it, and I think it's good. I like that it's going back to like the old Star Trek style, so that's good. Your thoughts real quick, because we did cover this on the podcast, but Picard. Go.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And I liked season 2 better than season 1.
Interesting.
Wow, you're the first person.
Yeah. Well,
You're the first person.
All right. And FYI, yes, I'm also in a fraternity. I was a TEAC member when I was in my undergraduate. So
okay.
It's great that you volunteer for your fraternity.
Yeah, I'm the district governor, so I'm still involved in national leadership, and so I'm the HMFIC in the Northwest up here for SIGEP, Sigma Phi Epsilon. Which TEAC, we get along with TEAC. We're good. We're tight.
That's good. Yeah, I'm glad. I don't think a lot of fraternities got along with my chapter at my school only because like we were kind of like the stoner, kept to themselves kind of guys, you know what I mean? Everyone else wanted to start fights with other fraternities. We were just like too chill to do that, you know? So Mike and Kyle, they're both the hosts of Gayish. Gayish is an independent podcast where Mike and Kyle talk about a different gay stereotype each weekly episode, from the hanky code and handjobs to breakups and depression. A 5-time nominee for Best LGBTQ Podcast by the People's Choice Podcast Awards, Gayish has been featured in Oprah Magazine, Esquire, BuzzFeed, and others, really putting our podcast here to shame, guys.
Oh.
But no,
That's our goal, is to try to womp every other queer person out there.
No, congratulations, guys, on all your success. Also, I mean, you guys didn't put in what was the other award? The Adult Award you guys got nominated for?
Yeah, we were up for a Cybersocket Award, which, like, telling my dad that I was up for a gay porn award was pretty fucking fantastic. Oh, shit. I just cussed twice in a row. Is this a cussing
it's
show?
fine. We have our explicit warning. Don't worry.
We did an NPR interview once, and I was like, just don't cuss, just don't cuss, just don't cuss, just don't cuss, just don't cuss.
Yeah, I always knew that I belonged on the list of nominees along with like Cade Maddox and like that. I was like, yeah, this feels right. This feels normal.
Did you guys? Who was I mean, did you guys have a porn star that you guys like were dying to meet, and did you guys get to meet them?
I got to meet Cole Connor, who's one of the lesser known ones, but I've stolen many videos about his orgies from the internet, and so that was and it was just he just made some like snarky side comment, and I just looked over and replied, and then was like, "Oh wow, I've seen you take so many dicks." That was in my head. I didn't say that out loud, but it was a lot of fun.
And Mike.
Yeah, I mean, there were several people that were nominated that didn't attend that I was looking forward to like running into, but did get to meet Cade Maddox and
nice.
Trenton Ducati, who was very daddy at that event, and that was good.
Oh, I
made my little
Devin
gay porn
Franco,
hat.
who was Devin Franco was one of the big ones that I wanted to meet, and I did.
Okay, I was thinking of one of the Franco brothers, but that's not right. Devin Franco is a porn star. That's right. yes.
I literally every time have to be like, wait, is this that mediocre actor or is this the porn guy?
Yes. So guys, once again, thank you guys for joining us. You guys are joining us because we're talking about queer as folk. You guys actually just recently covered that on your podcast, and I thought you guys did a great job. So I thought you guys would be great, guests for this episode. Because as I was listening, I think, generally speaking, I agreed with a lot of the things you said. However, the critic in me was kind of screaming at times because, I've been watching, this is like over 150 remakes and reboots that we've had to cover for this podcast, and like I think at a certain point you just become cynical. So I'm dying to talk about the new one because I think the new one is excellent fodder for the gay community to really queer community in general to talk about. Although full disclosure, guys, you guys were my second pick for this podcast. I guess I reached out to Johnny Sibili's agents to cover this episode, and also to Ryan O'Connell because I thought, hey, why not? They did not even respond, so there you go.
It was an honor to be nominated.
Yes.
Happily fill in for either of them.
Oh man, Johnny! If only. I mean, I really was trying to contact Johnny Sibili so I could just like get some FaceTime with him. That he's so hot. On the remake. But let's get right into it. So we're talking about Queer as Folk, and Queer as Folk is originally a British TV. It aired in 1989 on Channel 4. Focuses on the lives of 3 gay men living in Manchester's gay village around Canal Street. And it ran for about 8 episodes, right? And a 2-part follow-up in 2000. It was written by Russell T. Davies, who would go on to help reboot Doctor Strange.
Doctor Who.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Doctor Who.
Torchwood.
And Torchwood. Oh, look at that. Yes. And so, Queer as Folk, where does this title come from? So, Mike, I learned this from you.
Oh, great.
It was a dialect expression from some parts of northern England. There's not so queer as folk, meaning there's nothing as strange as people, which apparently is a wordplay for the English sense of queer as homosexual. So apparently the original script called for the show to be called Queer as Fuck. However, censors kind of flagged that even in Channel 4, which I think is the most risque of the British channels. So they kind of toned it down to Queer as Folk, which I think, from a creative standpoint is just like, that's still clever. And it was considered more suitable and stuff. And the show does focus around 3 main characters. We have Alan Jones, who is highly sexually active, and he's also successful in his career. full disclosure, guys, listeners here. Usually, me and Nicole do watch all these things. I didn't really do much watching of the British show because I saw enough of the Showtime one and the remake that I felt like it's just like I could just watch some summaries online. But I can tell you right off the bat, I didn't find Alan as attractive as some of the newer castmates. So just saying, I'm throwing my 2 cents in there.
Isn't that what we do with the U.S. TV show? It's like the British version, but hotter.
Basically,
Yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, looking at the cast is just like that's what the American creators said. It's just like we're just gonna make this show, but like sexier and hotter.
Yeah, that's what we bring to the table. It's just like no additional substance, just maybe more abs. I don't.
And God bless America for it, you know. Then there's also Vince Tyler, who he's Stuart Allen's longtime friend. Has less luck with men. And finally, there's 15-year-old Nathan Maloney, played by Charlie Hunnam, who is known for his role in Sons of Anarchy and the Pacific Rim film. And I think the first episode has that very famous rimming scene, right? So Pacific rim job.
Yep.
And he was 15 years old. So how do we feel about this, guys? Like, Eddie kind of was a little aghast when he saw it was 15 years old. Any thoughts?
Well, I mean, age of consent. I don't know what age of consent was in England at that time, but I assume that it was legal, and so it's more of a. I don't know. I'm a rule follower, so I'm like, hey, if it's legal, go for it and don't feel bad. Mm-hmm. But I know that that's not necessarily a universal feeling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we gay people are particularly sensitive about this because we've so often been labeled as pedophiles that then we get held to a different standard than straight people are. And even when we're the ones that are following the law, we get labeled as the pedophiles, even though the Republicans here are the ones that are actually the ones exhibiting the behavior that they are blaming us for. So I think we're protective and cautious of this, but like Mike said, we have laws that in place that say what the age of consent is, and if we're following the law and believe like that's what it should be, then as long as they're of age of consent, then go for it.
Yeah, I had to assume the age of consent has to be around that age because the lesbians who gave birth to Stuart's child didn't seem to mind that there was a 15-year-old child hanging out with them. And personally, I can't be too judgmental of this because I myself, like, by the time I was 15, I was like messing around with older guys because that's what I had access to, right? I was too scared to mess around with teenagers my age. So you go online looking for some fun, and usually the older guys are what you find. So I'm not going to pass judgment on that. Has anyone here actually seen the original? So I just admitted that I have not. Eddie, have you seen the original?
No, I didn't see the original.
No, you haven't seen the original either. Mike or Kyle, anyone?
Nope.
Nope. I've seen clips of it but back before I knew the difference, I've seen clips of like, I think someone like pouring water all over himself, and
that was Stuart. Yeah.
I was just waiting for that scene in the US version before I realized there was a difference. Cause like that was one of the early ones that I was like, God, I can't wait for that dude to pour water all over himself. But yeah. Yeah.
I think the most famous scene that I definitely saw was Charlie Hunnam getting rimmed by Stuart. And, Charlie Hunnam he was cute back then. I think he did get hotter as he got older. I'm more of a fan of his body than necessarily his face. That's just me. I don't know. To each their own, right? But the British show, it was popular enough it was controversial when it came out, right? In England. I think there was a little bit of a backlash in the gay community because they felt it was just, feeding some stereotypes.
Yeah.
And I think as the show progressed, like one of their sponsors like pulled out. Then after that sponsor pulled out, there was another backlash from the gay community, and it was Beck's Beer. So they tried to come back in, and they were like, "Nah, we don't want your sponsorship here." So the gay community seemed to have like an on and off again relationship with this show, right? Like, and I think that's fair. Like when a show is this sexually explicit and trying to show you a fantasy version of queer life, I think it's very easy to kind of really be divisive in the gay community. I think that can definitely be said to the Showtime version, which I'm just going to just go right into. So after the executives in Showtime kind of caught eye of the success of Queer as Folk for Channel 4, and they decided, let's bring it here. So the producers, let me just get their names. It was the producer. Sorry, guys.
No worries.
The producers for Showtime were. Oh, where are the names? I just had this.
Kyle, are you frozen?
I don't think so.
He sees. He comes in and out for me, but.
Oh, great.
Okay, yeah. So it was Ron Cohen and Daniel Lipman. They were. They developed the show. What happened was that they were under contract for a different show. The funding fell apart. So after the little setback, they kind of discovered the show Queer as Folk and decided, okay, we can pitch this to American audiences. And Showtime was the network that decided to give it the green light. And the goal that Ron and Daniel had was to show a very, very they call it real, like a real depiction of gay life, but I think it's just so hypersexual and so it glamorizes drugs and like kind of fit bodies that it's not necessarily. It's also fantasy. This is just a very fantastical life that they're showcasing that is now set in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So, Eddie, I'm gonna let you take it here. Do you want to talk about the characters and kind of the storylines a little?
Okay. Well, I don't know if I agree if it was fantastical.
You don't think?
But more raw.
Definitely.
And I mean, they definitely
raw.
dealt. Yeah, and it definitely dealt not only with kind of the rawness, the sexual energy of the gay community, but just also the general struggles that we deal with, like being in the closet, having to be in the closet at work, dealing with certain levels of persecution, gay bashing. So it definitely HIV and AIDS during that time period, and how people were treated. So like I said, it takes place in Pittsburgh, and it focuses on kind of four gay friends, their relationships, their loves, their lives, and their ambitions. So we have Brian Kenny, which we'll consider to be like our fuckboy.
Oh, yeah.
He may come across as cold-hearted, but as you see progress, there's something deeper about Brian that we get to explore when he meets Justin. He is best friends with the boy next door, the geeky guy, Michael. And Michael's kind of like a little bit of whiny, but he's kind of the heart of the group, He seems to understand Brian like no other. He puts up with Brian. He's the most patient with Brian's shenanigans. And that he has this deep love and is in love, with Brian. Then you have Emmett Honeycutt, and kind of the queen of the group, self-proclaimed queen, little femme. But there's something just like very special about Emmett.
And his last name was Honeycutt?
Yeah.
Wow.
And when he talks about his life and he talks about his journey, about like having to, when he finally decides that he's going to live his life the way he sees fit, he's going to be who he is. This is something just so beautiful about that character. And there's the understated Ted, who is so insecure about who he is and his looks, that he just kind of plays kind of like in the shadow of these characters. But if there's one character arc that gets put through the ringer, is Ted. We see definitely from the beginnings on how going to a coma, treating with drug addiction.
Ted got in a coma?
Yeah.
Okay.
Losing everything, having to pick himself from the ashes, and so forth, betraying his friends and then earning his friends' trust. So definitely Ted was one of my at least the storyline was one of my favorites there. And it's and then we have Justin, and Justin is kind of like coming of age, coming out. Is a twink that meets up with Brian and loses his virginity to Brian.
And then falls in love with Brian.
And falls in love. And then we see this kind of like love arc relationship in the seasons between Justin and Brian. And how Justin changes Brian or breaks through kind of Brian's shell. Mm-hmm. And you see the deeper and more how do you say, tender moments that Brian's character brings to the show.
I forget, how old was Justin supposed to be at the beginning of that show?
17.
He starts off 17.
17, yeah.
I think that's a little more palatable for American audiences.
Brian was 29.
Yeah.
Brian was 29.
And Brian was 29, yes. Again, I must have been, when I first saw the show, I was like 14. So at the time I was 14, I definitely was still a virgin, but I was already online, like talking to guys on AOL chat rooms and stuff at that age, and just fantasizing and stuff. So, in the age thing never bothered me then. It's still, I mean, I guess as I got older, I realized that, oh, this is kind of a little icky. But as a gay guy, it's just like, but as I could put myself back into the young days, it's just like I could put myself there. I know what it's like to be young and like horny and stuff. So it's like, who am I to judge? So I guess that just leads me to the questions. Like, when did you guys all watch this show? Like, how old were you all? Like, out of curiosity.
I did not watch it while it was out. I watched it, I think, in 2010 or so, when I, after I graduated college, I moved up to Seattle. I had my own place, and I was like, I can do anything I want. I like lived alone, and so I finally was like, oh my god, I can watch this show without feeling like I have to hide it. Like there was still some part of me, even though I lived alone, that I was watching, and I felt like, who's gonna see me watching this show with the sex in it and the gays. So that had been trained into me. But I watched it. So I guess that was 5 years after it.
5 years
ended.
after it ended, because the show lasted 5 seasons. DVDs, were they DVD rentals or
on Netflix or whatever?
Okay, got it.
Or whatever. Streaming
it might have been one of those streaming apps.
It was on Netflix for a while. Yeah,
it was on Netflix for a while. Yeah. Mike.
Well, yeah. So there's this little problem that I was married to a woman in the early 2000s, and so I couldn't. That wasn't going to help out my street cred for like passing as straight, So I didn't watch it at the time. I have caught some episodes here and there, like when it's on repeat, like because it was in syndication for a while. But I don't know that I've seen every episode, and nor do I think I necessarily have like. You see an episode from season 2 and then season 4 and then season 1, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? It's like a blender in my head. So
so you don't have like any continuity to some of these characters,
right?
Stuff.
Yeah.
Which is more or less how I can relate to watching this show initially, right? I did watch some of this show in order for the podcast, but I was watching it in secret. I was like 13, 14 because I was young. But I did have I remember at that age, like I was already watching like porn because like we had a hot cable box, and I was just obsessed with just watching porn. And this was the first time I was watching like softcore gay porn. Basically, that's what it felt like watching it. So I was just watching it in secret and just enjoying the shit out of it. Despite I no clue who these characters were or anything. I wasn't necessarily paying attention to the storyline. I was just watching these. Just men sometimes go at it and just waiting for those scenes to happen. So sometimes it would just be a matter of like me flipping channels and then turning back to Showtime to see it's just like, are they doing it yet? Oh my god, they're doing it. And I'm gonna watch. Eddie, what about you? When did you start watching this?
Oh my god, so much later. I was in college, so yeah, I remember hearing about it from other people in passing, like criticizing the show. I grew up very Catholic environment, Catholic friends, youth group, all that stuff. Went to a Catholic university. So kind of watching it in my dorm on my laptop. Didn't know why. Sometimes under the covers, just even though I had my own room, just yeah. And then that was my discounter with it, and I went I would rent it. I would rent it from Blockbuster actually, and I just went through all the seasons. I was really fascinated with this show. For me, there was nothing else like it. There was nothing at all that I can that called my attention. That wasn't I seen gay movies, but everything was always so sad. Here was just people living their lives, and it was just my God, is it wow.
Yeah, and that is and that makes sense, right? Because I think gay depiction in 2000. I wish Nicole were here because she would have a great history lesson on what gay depiction was. Sorry guys, Nicole's not here. She is a history buff, but I do know, for example, we were reaching the tail end of Will and Grace that had been on a few at this point, which was a comedic version of what gay life was, which I actually watched, and that one I watched publicly, right? Because it was safe to watch that one at home. 2003, we saw the premiere of Queer Eye for the straight guy, and that show, shockingly, I was more embarrassed about. I actually had more feelings about Queer Eye for the straight guy than I did for Queer as Folk, because in my mind, at a young age, I was associating Queer as Folk as more just kind of smut, as opposed to Queer Eye for the straight guy, which back then I had these feelings of just this is more of a mockery of the gay community, as far as I was concerned, until we did it for the episode. This was, I think, was one of our second episodes that we did for this podcast, and I realized it's oh no, there is definitely a lot more to Queer Eye for the straight guy. But Queer as Folk, I always felt was just just smut, so I never really paid attention to all of the storylines. And watching this, I gotta say, some of these characters I was kind of drawn to. So Ted is easily one of the most relatable ones. I can definitely say the drug use in this show didn't affect me. The hypersexuality didn't affect me. But my God, the way all these men looked is what affected me the most. As a fat Hispanic kid, I've never realized my otherness until really watching this show, especially in the gay community. And and it's something that you just cannot escape for so long, because even then, soon after, as I'm progressing to just straight up real porn, it all becomes these white, muscular men. I'm talking Sean Cody, Randy Blue and stuff, and that's just something you just can't escape, right? So this is where I think I have my flawed relationship with this show, Queer as Folk, is kind of the negative image I had of myself as growing up gay, and that's some, and it's not this show's fault, that's just media in general, but that for sure was one of the hardest parts about the show for me. I don't know how you guys. Mike, Kyle, you guys are both white men. How do you feel about this portrayal about how do you guys feel about this portrayal of white gay life?
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't realize the I was the white cis gay man that they were. So on one hand, I didn't until I got older realize how little other depictions of other types of people in the queer community, how little there was. But even this for me it was also what I was supposed to be in my mind. I had seen episodes of Queer Eye, I had seen episodes of Will and Grace, but this was the first. Brokeback Mountain was the other thing that I saw before this. This is the first TV series I can really remember that I saw every single episode, unless you count Kathy Griffin's My Life on the D List, which is also the gayest show I've watched. But this is who I was supposed to be, and there was so much about this that I did not connect to. And the fact that they were at the gym, that's where their group of friends met up to hang out, was at the gym. You were supposed to just be at the gym every day, and that's their central perk, that's their bar, that's their hangout. Did not relate to that, and I wish that this wasn't my first and one of my, at the time, only depictions of gay life, but there's a lot in there that taught me what I was supposed to be, and that really stuck with me and has stuck with me even now, even as we've gotten more and better representation.
Mm-hmm. Mike, what about yourself? Like, I know you mentioned that you were married, so you weren't necessarily watching this as it aired. Although,
Right.
fun fact, the show's highest ratings came with like straight women.
Sure.
For the show, like, because apparently there was just nothing like it yet on TV, which is what not necessarily the queer stories. It was more so like the cattiness
drama.
and the drama.
The drama.
that just wasn't on air yet.
Yeah,
on
before
TV.
Desperate
And so-
Housewives, there was queer as folk.
So apparently
Yeah.
this is so it found its footing in like women, really. Women and gay men is really where this show took off. But Mike, in terms of like its portrayal of like what it's kind of portraying gay culture, but I guess for me as a Hispanic man, I'm just like, I always saw it as just like specifically white gay culture, right? So like, I don't know, like, how did that make you feel and everything? Maybe when you're watching it, like when you're out of the closet, what's going through your mind?
Well, one thing about privilege is that you don't realize you have it until somebody like lets you know, right? Or
Right.
you experience some other way, right? So I think like my first time through, I grew up in a super white town in a conservative part of the world, and so like if all you see is white people on TV, you don't think anything about it until then. I moved to Seattle, which is a much more integrated, racially diverse place to be, and you start talking to your friends about it, and they're like, there's nothing but white people and queer as folk. And then you realize like, ding, aha, you're super right about that. Oh my goodness. Right. But I also wanted to talk briefly though about how there were parts of the queer community that reacted to queer as folk with like a shame reaction, right? Like is airing this dirty laundry to straight people where they can see it a good idea? Right. And at the same time, it is our dirty laundry, right? Like all of the things that they talk about, hypersexuality, drugs, alcohol abuse, all of those things are very real problems for the queer community. And so I just think it's interesting. Like you can't react with shame unless there's probably some kernel of truth there that you're fighting against. So yeah. There's also maybe a chicken and egg problem, though, of like, did this show create that culture? Or did this show just show a culture that was already there?
Excellent point. It's true. So when this show was, I think, announced, like obviously, like the Million Moms, I think they were like one of the original protest groups that were like very much against this show.
All 24 of them.
Yeah. And then, but not just that, the other backlash did come from the gay community itself because, as you pointed out, they felt it's just like, whoa. This is like, we're just really showing stereotypes here that is that what we want to put our foot forward? And it's one of those things in media that's so interesting when it comes to like representation of minority groups, where I think there is this idea of like, if we have a gay character, sometimes that's enough. So if we have stories that feature gay characters, that's enough. Is it then the next stage is like, but now we had to have flawed gay characters. And I think that's where this show was successful, right? Like having flawed gay characters. I mean, let's be very honest. Brian is the main character, right? Like he's kind of awful, right? Like he's just not I hate to say it, but he's just not a good person per se. And it's not because of it's not his hypersexuality that makes him a bad person, right? It's the way he just treats people as like just things is kind of what makes him so terrible. And he has like this, for a main character, he has like this weird hate towards heteronormality, which I find myself a little conflicted now because, I did the heteronormative thing of marrying a man, right? But I wanted this. It's a life that I chose. And this main character, Brian, is just so outspokenly against it.
When you take the whole story, right? You look at the whole story, you see that character evolve. That there is changes in that character too, and you get to see too when you meet his parents why there's that hatred coming from. Where all this stuff is coming from. It doesn't come from a vacuum. They give a little origin story here, give a little background, they flesh things out with Brian, and you see, okay, maybe this is why he deals with shit this way. This is why he's kind of closed off. This is why he doesn't let anybody in, or this is, and then you see when he does give, when he is generous, it's always in the background. It's always like him like doing something, and he doesn't need the world to know. He doesn't need to announce it. He does something, and that's it. He puts it out there.
So it's interesting that Brian would have like the shitty family life, because I think one of the smartest things they did with Michael was kind of give a mom who's quite the opposite, right? Like his mom is so down with the gay that I was
Debbie.
I was so jealous. I was so jealous because I think I didn't come out to my mother until Eddie, like when we were dating, right? Like that was like what, 8 years ago, and that's because she caught us. So like it's like I had no choice. Not caught us in the act. I just want to clarify this. She caught us like me trying to sneak him in. So I had to some explaining to do, but we were still caught. But yeah, so like it, and like so many of these episodes, Hal Sparks, who plays Michael Novotny, he is always just so like kind of like, ugh, mom, you're so embarrassing kind of attitude. And I remember there's such a I don't know, it's like this idea of like the grass is always greener, right? Like he should be so happy that he has a mom who is so supportive, and stuff. You know, not to pry, but like I don't know how to like I don't know if you see this relationship on screen, like how do you guys feel? Like do you guys feel like jealous? Or are you guys saying it's just like it's not realistic? Is is it silly? Is it too like fantasy?
I loved this depiction, especially because it was a contrast to the things that we usually saw of the main gay character. There, that we talked about a lot of stereotypes that they dealt with, but this is one that I thought flipped the stereotype, and they also did it in a way where there was still character conflict, and good or bad, regardless of how sometimes we were like, Michael, you have it so good, but also they need the mother and son to have conflict and conversation and issues, and so they had them in a way that wasn't based in I hate you and I want to kick you out. So I really like that, especially considering Justin had that whole kind of storyline of coming out and his mom having to come around and all that. Like we didn't need that twice, and it's nice to have a supportive parent figure. I thought that was one of the cool things that they did that was new and unique in this show.
And what I found interesting about Debbie is that she was always the sense of home for all the characters there.
That diner?
So, well, not even just a diner, but everywhere Debbie was, it was like home because she cared about everyone. Yeah. She was the mom for everyone. She opened her doors when Justin had no place to go. Justin had a home, and she took care of her brother, who was HIV positive. With AIDS, and she was always that caretaker, that loving, that that joy, that spirit, and also knew about tough love because she didn't take shit from anybody. Did not take shit from anybody. She put everybody in their place, especially Brian.
Yeah, and for this generation of TV, actually, thank you for bringing up the HIV positive brother. Like, I don't think up to this point, I don't think we'd seen a HIV positive gay man on TV, like as a character, for a long time. Like it had been a while. Again, Nicole would probably correct me and know exactly when this happened. But as far as I remember watching this, like I don't remember seeing prior to this, like on the show, like Will and Grace. Like I don't think did HIV ever come up on Will and Grace? Does anyone remember? I don't remember hearing about as a topic on that show. So
I don't remember it. No.
Yeah, and that's like the first major gay show that I grew up with, and it was never like brought up. I learned about HIV through like the history books and stuff. So I think when it's not history, it's not gone. It's not like a disease of long past. Like, yeah, we can manage it. Yes, we can prevent it, but like it's still a disease out there. And I think this was one of the show that had like kind of these real depictions of HIV gay men, because it was, focused around gay stories. So, yes, thank you for reminding me. Do you guys think how do you guys think, would you think your life would be very different if you had a mom like Debbie? Like,
well, I was going to say, I do have a mom like Debbie. My mom is basically Debbie Novotny. She's ridiculously supportive. She's on our show all the time. She cusses like a sailor, won't stop talking about her and other people's sex lives. She used to sell dildos for a while. Like my mom, and it's interesting because this phenomenon that you're talking about of like being then like the surrogate mom for all of these characters is very much the relationship that a lot of our listeners have with my mom. Like they don't have their own moms in their lives, and they really respond to her on the show and her presence. And I don't know. That's the most annoying thing about Michael Novotny, and to a lesser extent Mingus from the new show. Having a mom like that is awesome, because like the alternative is so much more painful. And I see people who've been disowned by their families and like legit have severe friction with their parents. I wouldn't trade that for the world. So like, quit your whining, Michael. You know?
Absolutely. Agree. I mean, my mom, for example, she was at my own wedding, and I think it was the wedding where like she realized, like, it clicked for her. It was like, oh my god, this is really happening. This is a gay wedding I'm in. And you can see her, she's walking down the aisle with me. She's like almost like a deer in headlights. She came around like during the reception, obviously. Thank God.
She came around quickly.
It took a lot of alcohol, but she
took
came
a lot
around.
of alcohol. A lot of alcohol.
But like, no, I will never forget this, right? Like, because my mom, up to this point, like, she had been making great strides, and then like she was ready for the wedding, but like it just like it was a reality, and it's just like Debbie would never. That would never be Debbie's case. Like Debbie would be planning that wedding, you know. Which I think was she involved with the wedding planning? Because I know that Michael gets married at the end, but I haven't caught up to there.
I don't remember. Do you remember? Connor?
No. Michael.
Is it like a small
Michael
wedding?
and Ben get married, and they get married like it was an impromptu thing.
Okay, got it. I feel like Debbie should
be. It was like
in
a bike tour.
I don't believe that for Debbie.
She was upset, but
I believe. Like, I would be furious.
She wasn't really.
Let me steer this shit back, because I know we started talking a little bit about Mingus, and I'm so excited because I have thoughts on that too. So I guess, what is everyone's relationship here with the show now, right? Like the 2000 to 2005 Queer as Folk. Is it a show that we like? Do we avoid it? Do we not talk about it with people? Because it's not like, it's one of these shows where I think when it came out, it was like very culturally significant, right? And yet, time passes and like people have almost like forgotten about it, if not for this reboot that had just come out. But I don't know, why is that? Like, I mean, how do you? What are your opinions on the show? Like, do you guys still think about it? Is it a show you think about? Or is it just like days have passed?
I remember the show a lot. This made a huge impression on me, and even before this new reboot, it was something that I thought about a lot as a gay man, and definitely made its mark on me. If I try to think, outside of myself, I think it was big for, the sexual revolution and freedom of sex. I think there's a good thing there of, we're gay, but fuck it, we're gonna have sex, and it's okay to show, us and our sex and what we want. But of course there's so many stereotypes, whether that's surfacing what's happening or surfacing what's more likely to happen in our community. There's so much that I took away from that I thought was an expectation out of me as a gay man, that I if I was ever like a video games cause kids to be violent, like this is the closest I get to that. I don't believe that, but this is the closest I get to be like, Queer as Folk made me this way. So some of the shitty things that either I've done, or whether that's drug use, whether that's sex because I thought I was supposed to, or I have not, this unfortunately has not encouraged me to go to the gym at all, but I just feel bad about myself. But like any of those feel like, I don't know, a lot of those feelings I think came from this show. And I think if it wasn't going to be this show, there was going to be another show that showed the same thing. Like, it's hard to escape some of those stereotypes in our media, but I personally really struggle with this show and have a lot of very negative feelings personally.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. Mike, yourself?
Yeah, the original American Queer as Folk is super white, super cis, super able-bodied, and all of those things it just wouldn't fly today. But I also, like, to go back to Star Trek, right? If you watch Star Trek, the original series from the 60s, it was groundbreaking and a cultural touchstone and moved the needle on so many things, and it is terrible. It would not fly on today's television for a number of reasons, nor should it. So you just have to kind of appreciate it for what it was, say thank you for what it did, and never speak of it again, right? And I think that's where Queer as Folk is. The first American version. I think it was important. I think it moved the needle on a lot of things. I think it's culturally significant, and I don't know that I can recommend it as a show now.
Yeah, excellent. No, I think that's absolutely fair, and I think what you said is true. That would never fly today, and I think that's how we got to Queer as Folk 2022, the Peacock original. So a little background on the show Queer as Folk. It was originally supposed to be a Bravo show. I think we announced it on our podcast in our news segment like years ago, and it was a show that had been many rumblings about for a long time. Like, they have been trying to reboot this show for quite some time. It was, like I said, originally announced for Bravo. However, in 2019, it was announced that it would be in development for Peacock, which was the new service that they were like developing at the time. And in April 2021, Peacock ordered the full series, and I think it was released in mid-June. The full series dropped. Unlike other Peacock shows where it's like week by week. And let me see. The Stephen Dunn, he was set to write and direct. And Dunn has indicated that this incarnation of the series was inspired directly by Davies' original series as a jumping off point, stating that he did not take the Showtime adaptation into consideration, which I find interesting when shows try to do this, because it's like, then why take the name? Like, why hold on to the moniker Queer as Folk if you're not going to do? I know there were some nods in the show, but it's just like, just make it an original storyline. That's just my gripe, which I'll gripe about a little later. But one of the major differences between this show is its setting. It is set in New Orleans, which is one of my favorite cities in the U.S. So I think as soon as I found out it was New Orleans, I'm just like, well, I'm watching this because like this is my town. I keep telling Eddie, it's just like, we're going to retire in New Orleans, and hopefully the hurricanes will be taken care of with the global warming. Fingers crossed. And the next major change in the show is its diversity, right? We have racial and ethnic diversity. We have the queer sexual spectrum on full display. And we also see something that I don't think, as far as I know, I don't think I've ever seen in media, which is just like really, really stark depictions of queers with disabilities. And I found that fascinating. I think I shouldn't say never, because I did see the show Special, starring Ryan O'Connell, who is one of the writers on this show, and he's also one of the actors. He plays Julian, I'll get a little more into that. But and then the biggest difference here with Queer as Folk is that this has kind of like an overreaching arc, and that is this is the aftermath of a shooting that was inspired by the Pulse shooting in Miami. And I think I learned from you guys that this was released the same weekend as like the anniversary. Yep. Okay, that's I think because I remember when I found that I'm like, that's
interesting,
bold move by Peacock to do that. But they did it. They released it all. So anyone want to dive right in? Like, I'm just gonna say some character. I'm just gonna, you know what? Let me just go into some of the characters and story arcs, and then we can just talk about it. But we have
dive right in like Brody did into Mingus's ass.
Oh, okay, yeah. So Brody, my main note I have here is that he is just the worst.
He's the worst.
He's the absolute worst. I don't know how he functions as a human being.
His character contradicts itself. Like, his origin to who he is now, makes no sense to me. And total missed opportunity with this character.
I don't know.
Can you say more about that? I don't know
go ahead.
If I get what you're saying.
All right, so you have him like he starts out, well, when you see flashbacks, right? So he's this honor student. He is pressured by his father that he's going to be a doctor. He's going to go to medical school. So he feels like everything is mapped out for him. You just see like an overall nice guy. But then when we're introduced to him, he's left medical school. And there is this kind of like, I don't know, there's no sense of like, there's a certain stupidity when he approaches people.
Yeah,
and
he has
just like no emotional intelligence.
There we go.
In his approach to people. And the missed opportunity is that they only show his dad like little scenes here and there, but there should have been kind of an overall tension going on. I mean, he went off to medical school. It seemed that he left kind of like abruptly, left in people's lives abruptly, and then he kind of shows up and everything's okay coming through the window, and kind of his dad is like, okay, when are you gonna leave? You know?
Yeah.
But I thought that they would be like the way the way they present the flashbacks, kind of more tension between father and son, which they just totally don't explore.
Yeah.
I think one of my biggest gripes with Brody is just like, outside of the lack of emotional intelligence, he is just so immature that like I cannot fathom the fact that he got into medical school. Like I'm not, we know you don't have to necessarily be the smartest person, because there are some medical professionals out there who do promote like anti-vax shit. So like I can forgive that, but like his lack of like just awareness and reading social cues is just like mind-boggling that anyone would exist like this. So he was incredibly frustrating to watch on screen. Like I don't know how you guys felt.
And the ability, the gift that he has of playing the victim when it's all his fault, and deciding that, you know what, because you're talking to me and you're telling me the stuff that I did wrong, I'm going to walk away because I can't handle an argument or confrontation, so I'm just going to walk away.
How do you guys feel about Brody?
So when I hate a character this much, I consider it a win on the part of the art. Right,
okay.
We're supposed to hate him. He's a malignant narcissist. He is a deeply flawed person in a way that's supposed to give us horrible, awful feelings, and they did that super successfully. I also think, you know, pretty privilege is a thing. He is smoking ass hot, and I think that makes for a certain constellation of personality traits that we see fairly accurately depicted here.
Okay, that's fair.
So I love the character because he's insufferable.
Okay. Kyle, any feelings that you have on Brody?
I mean, I'm attracted to bros and people with the name that starts with bro, so I have nothing bad to say about him. He's a perfect, flawless human. No, I love deeply flawed characters of any sort, and I love the fact that I think there's a kind of gay representation that is trying too hard to be nice and be like, okay, well, we've had all these bad or sexualized or whatever representation, and they try to swing the other way and make them too good or too try to make them too perfect or nice or I don't know, something that doesn't feel authentic. I think it's more authentic to have a very deeply flawed character with real story and just someone that makes the wrong decision, bad decision, than a perfect package of a gay character.
I think you're right. I think there is a problem when media tries to give us very sanitized versions of characters, and they did not do that with Brody, right? Like Brody is absolutely flawed. I think maybe my biggest qualm might be that the actor himself wasn't very, very good at times. There's a scene where he's giving like he's supposed to give like this very impassioned plea to Bussy, the drag queen, to let Mingus perform, and it came. I was cringing. I was just like, this is just not good acting on this part. But do you guys think that he makes a good main character? Because by all means, he is the main character. A lot of the stories will flow from him. He's not the only character, obviously, but because this is kind of an ensemble cast, but like a lot of the plot is derivative of Brody's experiences
and how people react
to him.
I think the main character is actually not a person at all, but it's Brody and Ruthie's relationship. I think that the way that it evolves and changes and where it came from and where it ends up going, I think is the main character, and so he's half of a main character. And and after saying all these really great things about the character, I think their relationship as a main character is my biggest gripe with the series. I didn't like it at all.
Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit about Ruthie. She's played by Jessie James Keitel. I think she has like just this ethereal presence on screen. I loved her. Like she's just great. I think she's so captivating. she is a trans character, and we do get to see a little bit of her flashback where we see her before she transitioned and like coming to terms with even being trans and the relationship that she had with Brody. So it turns out that her and Brody were ex-lovers. They weren't. So we see them as best friends in the show, but I wasn't aware until that very point that they were in a relationship. And Ruthie is also the mother to Brody's child that she has with Shar, who is her girlfriend. Her girlfriend, yeah. Shar is her lover, and they are going to have a kid. Brody is a sperm donor, very similar to the original Queer as Folk storyline of like the lesbian couple having the kid with Brian. The difference here being non-gender conformity, because Shar is non-binary, right? So she
I was
is
just going to say
non-binary.
that Char's non-binary, so I don't even know if lesbian is an appropriate term.
You're
for
right.
The
I didn't even think about
there.
that. Yeah. So that
be her partner, not her girlfriend.
her
Yeah,
partner,
yeah.
right? Okay, my mistake. See, and this is where I'm constantly correcting myself. Like,
It's hard for straight people. It's hard for us too. You know.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. And you just try to be as respectful as possible. But yes, you're right. Her partner, Shar, they give birth to twins that are Brody's biological children. I think she was just such a presence on screen. I think she made such Ruthie we're talking about. She made such poor decisions that I also felt like were a little bit silly at times and a little contrived. I think she was a little bit too cool with Brody's relationship or lack thereof with Mingus as a teacher, because I feel like she should know better. Like she could have gotten in trouble for that.
Yeah.
No,
I said on our show, like my favorite moment in the pilot is when she gave Mingus like upgraded their grade to whatever a D for no other reason than them intentionally using the "I'm queer and you're queer," and they just leaned into that, and Ruthie was like, okay, and did it, and it was like there was no good justification as a teacher. That was definitely a bad move. That was not a perfect move, but it was just I just wanted that character to be like, you know what, fuck the norms that are expected of this. I'm just gonna do this, and I'm gonna be a queer looking out for a queer. And I really liked that flawed moment when it was helping other queer people.
yeah, I did too. I thought it was cute. I wasn't at that point. I wasn't aware that Ruthie was going to be like a main character. So then Ruthie, as the more and more we see Ruthie, though, the more and more I'm just like, Ruthie, like so many of these problems you're just really causing yourself, girl. Like just her blatant disregard of Shar's feelings all the time, just lying so she could go hang out with Brody. It made me so mad. I was so mad at Ruthie so many times. I was constantly trying to forgive her, but it's just like, Ruthie, you're just making these mistakes over and over again. I don't understand. And I think, Mike, to your point though, as the show progresses, we're realizing that this show is not just about Brody. Yes, it is very much about Ruthie and their, I don't know, I think it's kind of a toxic relationship because I just don't think they're good for each other. Like, personally, I don't know how you guys feel.
They're both insufferable and they deserve each other.
Oh, okay. There was a great episode that involved dead naming. I think that's the flashback episodes that involved terrible wigs. But I think they did this very creative thing of like bleeping out anytime we heard Ruthie's dead name. For anyone listeners who don't know, dead naming is the actually, it's anyone. You guys are probably better at explaining this. I'm sorry.
Dead name is referring to a trans person by the name they were given at birth instead of the name that they chose when they transitioned.
Thank you. Yes, and so this is in this episode. The flashbacks focus when they were in high school. So as I mentioned, they have terrible wigs, but they are, they're playing high school students as like 30-year-olds. They're like in a relationship, and we learned that they're in a relationship. Every time that her name is said before she transitioned, it's bleeped out, and I thought that was one of those strokes of genius that I think this show had. It was just like, oh, this is good, and then the dead name gets dropped again by Noah in the present, and it's like a big to-do moment. But this is like, I think Ruthie was one of my favorite characters because I think, flaws aside, I think she had some of the more interesting things visually going on the show. I don't know how anyone else felt.
You said visually?
Yeah, I'm thinking from like just the way her looks. The way I feel like every time the camera angled on her, there was always like a little bit of camera movement. So like she always had this very ethereal presence on screen. So that's just from a visual standpoint. Her storyline is, I think, some of the more, because her fight with Noah, I think she was absolutely justified to be mad at him, but she also did choose to stay at a party when she saw her students there. So it's just like, you kind of made this also yourself, this mess. But I don't know why she got in trouble.
you mean Brody, right?
With Brody, I'm sorry. With Brody.
Yeah.
When she got in the fight with Brody, it's because her students saw her at a party and then they took video of her. She got in trouble for that, which makes no sense because it's just like, it was a party. It's not like, and the kids were underage, so it's like they should be the ones in trouble, not her. I don't know how that works out in New Orleans, so.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, I don't know if it was hinted that maybe they're just looking for any excuse because she is trans, you know? That's just my thoughts. Let's move on to Mingus. So, Mingus. All right, so we've agreed that Brody and Ruthie can be insufferable. Does anyone else think that Mingus is also insufferable, or is that just me?
I just feel the problem with Mingus is that he has all the problems.
Yeah, agreed.
All the problems. It's like him exploring like this like the birth of drag is about to it's taking place with him, wanting to get into drag school. Then the shootout happens, then that experience, Brody saves him, and then that experience and that connection. And then it's like Brody rejects him, and now it's like, I'm fucking everybody, and now I have HIV.
Yeah, spoiler. Sorry, guys, but the big character arc with Mingus at the end is that he tests positive for HIV, and I kind of agree with Eddie on this one. It's just like they're giving a lot of problems to this one character that I think you could just spread out over time. Yeah, in my opinion.
Mingus is non-binary, right? So
Mingus. Them. I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. Them.
I had never seen a character like Mingus before, so I think it was really cool to see them, and I had this negative initial reaction to seeing them both be non-binary and also pursuing drag, because that I felt like for a show that had not just one, they didn't just pick, okay, we're gonna have one person of color, we're gonna have one person that's disabled. They had more than one person to kind of tokenize. They didn't tokenize each person. They had multiple types of people that were represented. And so to have a character that was both non-binary and dealing with drag felt like they were conflating some things with gender that I didn't know necessarily belonged. But that aside, I like Mingus's character, their relationship with their mom, their I like some of the challenges they face, and they're beautiful, which is frustrating. So yeah,
they are. I think, again, another character, great screen presence. You mentioned their relationship with their mother, but that was one of the biggest, most nerve-wracking points for me in the show, is that they actually are so annoyed by their mother, played by Juliette Lewis, and it's just like, why do you feel this way with your mom? Like, she's so nice, she's so caring, she wants to be there for you.
You can wear her clothes, you can use her makeup,
and they were just sometimes just mean to Juliette Lewis's character. So, Mike,
but isn't that how high schoolers are? Like,
that's and it's true. Like, it's that idea of like grass is greener, right? Like,
yeah.
So I think also too, I don't know about you guys, but Rolando and I grew up with very strict mother kind of presence, and always having to be kind of like, this is the way you act, you can't, you can't act this way, you can't get out of line. So it's always this feeling. So when you see kind of these depictions of mom where they're so open and they're just like, hey, you expressing yourself, that's great. That's like, whoa. It's just not my experience. Just not my experience at all, So it's just like, don't be a dick to that.
Right?
Yeah.
For me, that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking in my head. But
absolutely,
obviously, this is the story. This is the character. This is a young person,
So I guess one of my questions I have for this character is, wouldn't a Zoomer be really hip to Brody's toxicity. That was just my thought.
I think that I actually really liked about this character that they were so head over heels, fucking insane, borderline stalker about Brody. Because I think that's how it works sometimes. I think that we can't really help who we're attracted to, and love makes people stupid. Nothing makes somebody dumber than love, and to see that done, I really enjoyed that. Again, in the fucking gave me the heebie-jeebies the whole time. I'm really I'm creeped out by the whole thing. That's good art, in my opinion.
Yes, I would agree with you.
And
so,
then there's this whole. The other thing that's wrapped around all this is the traumatic moment that happens at Babylon, and how Brody ends up saving Mingus's life.
Right. Yep. I think that was one of my favorite things about Mingus's character, because that obsession that they feel towards Brody makes sense in this fact that Brody saved them from this shooting, and of course you're gonna create an instant bond that's just going to be unbreakable. That made sense. I just think I don't know, love just, I guess you're right, love just makes you do crazy things, because at a certain point I feel like I would have taken the hint that Brody's just not interested in me,
your first love just, it doesn't matter. I think it makes everyone, it doesn't matter who the other person is or what they do. There's something about it that just makes you so stupid, and you can just forgive everything you thought it's almost like you have to be broken by that first love so that you can find those traits in the next one. And I think Mingus is going through that.
Yeah, I would agree. And, I said I can't be judgmental of Brian from the 2000 show and his sexual promiscuity ending up with an older man. I guess when you guys put it into perspective, Mingus being madly in love makes you do crazy things. You guys are right. You guys beat me on that one, because I understand Mingus a little bit. I think he was insufferable too. How do you guys feel about his drag?
I was insufferable and in love when I was in college. I forgave so many flaws and shitty treatment, and
How do you guys feel about Mingus's drag? Because they really focus a lot on in the first episode and the final episode on the actual drag performances. What do you guys think of them from maybe just a visual storytelling point of view?
I loved the drag. I thought it was not unexpected, not a kind of. It felt like a newer wave of drag. It felt like a newer interpretation. It felt like it wasn't a classic blonde lady that had, lots of eye makeup and big lips. And, it just felt like a new way of doing it that I thought fit Mingus's, instead of what I said, fit Mingus's character and what they were doing. So I liked their performance. They were I don't know, tee-hee, and then got on the stage and was they were, great.
Yeah.
So
Right. I think go ahead, Mike.
I loved the craft, right? So
yes, exactly. That was on the tip of my tongue. It was just you won me over.
Yeah.
I do think the finale performance that we do get from Mingus, and maybe it was his penultimate episode, but the drag that they do for the saving of Babylon, or when they're trying to buy Babylon, I think that one might have been again, from a cinematic point of view, this one's well shot. I think it was Mingus is an excellent performer. The actor who plays Mingus, actually I should say his name, they are played by Finn Argus, and they gave a top-notch performance as Mingus in and out of drag. Mingus is absolutely very captivating on screen. Let's move on to Julian, who I think is the next major character that we do have. He has cerebral palsy, and he is our representation of a character with disabilities in the gay community. Not our only representation, right? Because we do have a second one, but he is he is one of the main characters who has a disability. He's played by Ryan O'Connell, who, as I mentioned, he is a writer he wrote Special, that's on Netflix. He's also been a writer on The Babysitter's Club remake, reboot in Netflix, and he did some of the Will and Grace reboot as well. And I'm just gonna say this right off the bat. I think he sued himself a little. I don't blame him, right? But like he did write an episode where he gets to bang both Nile DeMarco, who played an escort, and then he goes on to like bang Johnny Sibili, who plays Noah, in that one episode. And I just felt like it's just like a little transparent. I'm not going to call it out too hard because if I were in his shoes, I would have done the same.
Yeah, yeah. Look, fucking write it down. If I'm in a position of power and I get to make it so that I get to make out with Nile DeMarco, it's fucking happening.
Oh
right?
my god. So true.
I think part of the reason he didn't show up on the show is because he may have seen my Instagram that got a few views, in which I was just I was pretending like I'm writing the storyline. I'm just like I was just saying it's just like I'm gonna fuck Nile DeMarco and then I'm gonna fuck Johnny Sibili and there's nothing anyone can do. I'm the writer. This is my show now. So Ryan, if you're listening, I doubt, but sorry. I know, no shade. I think it was, like I said, I would have done the same thing. I do think the character Julian is one of my favorite characters on this show. So we find out that he's gay early in the series because he was cruising in the mall bathrooms, and then we find out that he has like this kind of weird connection with sex because of his disability. And I think exploring that on TV, again, we've seen it a little bit in special, but seeing it in this kind of show, in this kind of hypersexual context, I think was a little almost groundbreaking, in my opinion. I don't know how you guys felt. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. It was something like I've never seen that before. Not in this way. Mm-hmm. And I thought I thought it was handled really well, but I'm not a member of the disabled community, so I don't
That's
know.
True.
If I'm definitely not qualified to weigh in.
Mm-hmm.
But like Andrew Gurza, who's a friend of our show, was one of the consultants on it, and he actually had a cameo. So and I know that they put a lot of thought into handling these issues well, exploring them in a real human way. So yeah, I found it super, super interesting.
Yeah, you mentioned that on your podcast. Who was he in? Do you know who he was in the episode? I'm assuming it was in the Fuck Crippled People episode.
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is one, they have like a cripple, like, well, I don't think that's a PC term, but they have a people with disabilities sex party.
Yep, he's the wheelchair user that had the orange beanie on. That he's credited as cute boy. Yeah.
Okay. Oh. Yeah. And even that episode I thought was interesting because me as a able-bodied gay person, I don't think about queer spaces and how hard it is sometimes for people with disabilities to just access them, right? Like even like, so I'm thinking even here in New York City is like right next to us. I mean, a lot of those bars are all stairs. Like, I don't know how many have elevators, and it's just something me as I just don't think about. And I think watching that on the show, I found interesting, and we actually got a lot of that through the eyes of this one character named Melvin, who he's in a wheelchair, if I remember correctly, right? He's an amputee, and he ends up forming a relationship with a sex worker. Yeah. How do we feel about Melvin's character? What are your thoughts outside of the great depiction of disability and being queer? How do we feel about Melvin as an actual character? Anyone have any ideas?
I mean, the first episode, it was all about like just really highlighting the difficulty of accessing spaces, LGBT spaces. I thought that was it was one of those. It made sense as kind of the opening, like, let's just let you know first and foremost that these spaces are not accessible. Just right. They're just not. And I thought that was a kind of great entry point. And I liked that, like I said, like there isn't just one character with disabilities. They have multiple characters with disabilities. They're not just relying on Ryan McConnell to do all of it. They had Andrew Gurza come in here and consult. So I liked that. I like that they showed multiple angles of it.
Yeah, one of the things I liked about Melvin was that he was kind of bitchy and kind of catty, but I love that about Melvin's character. It just, I don't know, it makes sense for a character who is on a wheelchair, right? Like, you would be bitter about life, and I don't think it's a wrong thing to show that on screen. Like, I don't think, again, we don't have to show a sanitized version of life all the time on TV.
Well, I also think, able-bodied or not, everybody has that friend who is super prickly, and it's maybe a defense mechanism, and who is so catty and bitchy that you thank God that they're on your side, or that you're you almost like you've accomplished something by getting on their good terms because they seem to hate everybody. I think that person exists in real life pretty often.
Yeah, I would agree on that one. Just to kind of wrap things up a little bit here, what are your thoughts on the hypersexual scenes of this show? Right, I think that's one of the things that made the original Two Queer as Folk kind of memorable, is like their depiction of like gay sex. They kind of were no holds bar, and I think Peacock's version here did the same thing. So how do we feel? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I enjoyed myself, if that's what...
Don't describe any more detail of how you did that, Mike. I mean, you in a redo of Queer as Folk, you got to make it super... If they did a lot of great things to evolve and show more diversity, but they got to make it... It's about sex. Like, that's
right.
The original... Yes, they showed real issues and queer issues, but like... God, you got to show a ton of sex. And if you didn't, what are you doing and what are you remaking? So they had to, that's part of the purpose and the revolution of the original.
I would agree. I think comparatively, I think some of the editing for these sex scenes was, I would dare say, more beautiful. One of the ones that does come to mind is the second episode. I think that's maybe second or third episode, after they're all dealing with the trauma from the shooting at Babylon. There's a scene where they're all trying to masturbate, and I think from a camera point of view, they did an excellent job kind of showcasing the beauty that is masturbation, right? Self-love. And I mean, God, it helps that everyone is just gorgeous in this show. You know what I mean? Like Ruthie's hot, Noah's hot, bro. Everyone, they're all hot, right? So, and I think one of the other sex scenes that also comes to mind for me is the sex scene between Melvin and the sex worker. It was a very passionate sex scene. Again, as far as I remember in media, I don't think I've ever seen such it wasn't explicit, but a very real depiction of like sex between an amputee and a sex worker, right? Like it was almost raw to a point that I just wasn't expecting for this show to go there. Eddie, I mean, in terms of the sex scenes, like I guess my question is like, was this show showing all this sex on media a good thing or a bad thing? So Eddie, I'll let you go on that.
I'm all for it.
I
tell you the truth, I'm all for it. I thought definitely you have great eye candy, and yeah, some of these things are shot in a way that they're beautiful. Some of them are raw. Some of them are just like very intense. And yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. I say, let's keep it going.
Okay.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I also think that, like, especially compared to the first one of the biggest differences about this time around is it has far less of the burden, the percentage of gay representation that this represents in just our total media landscape. Like, it doesn't have to take on the burden of being the gay show. There are lots of other shows. If you don't want sex, there are plenty of other shows that have something you're looking for. So it doesn't have to be the only thing there. So it doesn't have to take on every queer person's burden and depiction.
I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because it is true. I was watching some message board where they were like kind of criticizing this show. It's not, they were just saying it's just like, oh, it's not it's such a shame thing because like we only get so many queer shows. But like the truth is, I think after the streaming revolution, we've gotten so much more queer programming and queer-centric I mean, I'm just thinking Love Victor just dropped like a month ago, was Heartstopper, right? And these are like obviously aimed at a younger audience, but if you want your sweet saccharine stuff, you have shows like Heartstopper and Love Victor. If you want something a little more edgy, you have now this one. You technically have also Euphoria. Let's be, because that's another show that has like non-binary.
That's a whole nother level.
But and that's I think my thing. I think from a creative point of view, sometimes the show tried to go there like Euphoria does. I think the problem is that sometimes I think the show didn't have, I don't know, that cinematic quality, and that's just me being nitpicking as someone who just reviews a lot of stuff and study filmmaking. But overall, I think the sex scenes were, I think, done pretty. I think they were handled very classy. I think one of the most interesting parts of one of the sex scenes was when we saw Shar and Ruthie engage in sex, and we saw Ruthie's genitals. Right. So the last instance that comes to mind on TV was when that show American Gods had a gay sex scene, and they included seeing the bottom's genitals, right? So in here we have Ruthie. I don't think she was. I think she was she being, I don't know if she was being penetrated by Shar or if they were using a toy, but we just see Ruthie's genitals, and they made a point of seeing Ruthie's genitals. I thought that was an interesting choice. I don't know how anyone felt when they saw this. Like, were you squeamish? Were you just like, oh, good, right on, like show it, like let's show what real sex is like? How did you guys feel?
It was a cornucopia of feelings, and you said a lot of them. I mean, I don't think that there has ever been a trans woman's penis on screen in a positive light. Like there have been some like body shaming type things that I've seen, but like to just show like here's a beautiful sex scene and here's this trans woman's penis, I think is that's groundbreaking just for being first. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I would agree.
And it was hot. It was a hot scene. It was great.
Yeah, it was. So, and the last thing I just want to say about this, about all the sex scenes, is like, yeah, it was all hot, but like for a show that had so much diversity, my one complaint is, as a fat person, just no fat people on this show. That was my one qualm I will say I had with this show. It's not like I'm not gonna protest the show, because I binged this show, so on some level I must have enjoyed it. But I'm just saying, season 2, give me a fat person who wants to engage in some like sex scenes. I'm thinking of like Looking, when they included season 2. Augustine's boyfriend, right? He was a heavy set guy, but I think he showed his penis and everything on things, and I think we need some more of that kind of representation on screen, in my opinion, because who doesn't like looking at beautiful people?
Yeah, well, I'd like to see somebody bigger who isn't just sassy or a drag queen, because I think that happens pretty often, and like just a regular person who has a bigger body would be good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just speaking from experience. It's just like, I am fat. I have had sex. Like, I'm not like, like, you know what I mean? And I enjoyed it. And people did enjoy it with me, contrary to what media would let you believe, Okay, so I guess let's just get to our feelings overall on this show, right?
But hold on.
You're going to hold.
Let's not overlook that Kim Cattrall is on the show.
Oh, I did overlook her. Kim Cattrall.
And the fact that you did not recognize her the way I did, it's very disappointing, especially when you have a picture of her like right there next to.
I have her as a missing persons poster for Sex and the City.
Oh god.
No, it's true.
So what are our feelings about that?
Eddie's right. Eddie saw Kim Cattrall in the first episode, and he's like, "Is that Kim Cattrall?" I was like, "No, that's not her. She has a huskier, sexier voice." And it took me a few episodes to realize, like, "Oh my god, it is Kim Cattrall. It's our queen. She's back. She's back on screen." I liked Brenda's character. How do you guys feel about her relationship at the end with Shar?
Oh god.
There's a lot of feelings there to unpack. I mean, this is the baby's grandmother. For starters.
Yeah, there's that. There's also like Shar was the pristine character that wasn't super deeply flawed, and I wanted her to stay that way, or them to stay that way. And then when they fucked up or got tainted by behaving that way, I was really disappointed. But then also in a uncomfortable feelings make me happy about TV. So
I just want to point out though, for two new parents, twins, they seem to have a lot of time to do other things.
Yeah.
My experience with people with newborns is they have no time. They're walking zombies, and I'm just like, I don't know how realistic is this one.
This is Rachel as a baby in Friends, and like it only
And,
shows
yeah,
up
she's-
a couple
well,
times
yeah.
a season, just when they need a storyline around a baby.
Very, very similar to that for sure. Whenever the babies are going to pose a problem is when they show up on screen. I think to go back to Brenda and Char's character, I think one of the things that upset me when they hooked up was just like I really was enjoying their friendship, and I really would have loved for this to have stayed. There's something I think beautiful about seeing a black non-binary character being friends with a cis white woman from culture clashing, right? And just bonding. And I think I was enjoying that kind of storyline. And when they decided to I'm going to say jump the shark a little on that one. I was a little disappointed. I'm just like, oh God, I liked Char's character. Like Char was, as you said, one of the more redeemed. She was one of the characters who was on the straight and narrow. And I think, bummer. Yep. Which that was the first one to jump the shark, but I think we hinted at a little Ruthie and Brody at the end of this first season, they hook up, right? And when that happened, again, I kind of got this feeling of just I don't know if I want to I'm gonna watch a season 2. I will, but I was when their relationship happened, I'm just I just don't know how I feel about this. How did you guys, Mike, Eddie, I was just what's going on? Too many hookups.
I just didn't believe it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if they just didn't sell it properly or if they didn't plant enough seeds. But I didn't see it coming at all, and then hated it because then I just didn't buy it. They didn't earn that reveal, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I would agree with you, right? I think this is, I don't know. I think they were maybe cramming. I don't know if they were trying to just hook us in for a season 2.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think they could have built out this friendship. There's nothing wrong. I don't know why writers always want to jump to relationships. There's nothing wrong with just being platonic friends in media. You know what I mean? I understand the show is very hypersexual, but we can still have them be friends. There's nothing wrong with that also. I think that was one of the positive things about seeing the original Queer as Folk. Well, not the original, the Showtime
American
one
version.
is seeing gay friendships that sure we have crushes on one another. That happens, but for the most part, they were all platonic friends, I would say. Right? I'm not wrong about that.
Yeah.
I know that
Did
Mike
they
tried
all
to
end
hook
up?
up with
Emmett hooked up with
Ted. You're right.
With
They
Ted.
did
They
for a
to
while.
have a
Michael-
relationship.
Mike
Michael and-
made out with
Brian.
Bryan.
Yeah, but that was always their thing.
And they were he was also on
that
drugs.
was
So,
that was
mostly platonic. This was
most-
Brody professing his love to Ruthie. That's the big issue. It was this deep love
which
that
I
he
feel
had.
only because he saw what was going on with his mother and Char. When he saw that, when he's he has this information now, then I felt are you using that as your courage to tell Ruthie how you feel?
Yeah.
So I just felt I don't know. It's just this could have. That's one season. I felt they just threw everything in the kitchen sink at it.
Let's see what's 6.
And I was just slow. I even Julian and Noah's relationship. There were moments I don't know how I feel. I think I said if this was a slow burn relationship, a Rachel and Ross, a build up, they're living together. Noah's going through his stuff. He lost Thaddeus, which was an awesome name. And he lost that. He's dealing with Brody coming back. He has all this shit that he's dealing with. And then there comes Julian, who becomes a friend, a rock, and then it was the slow buildup of attraction. I definitely would have enjoyed to see that because I love both these characters. But they really, wow, it was just okay, we're hitting this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Within
they
this.
kind of a lot of the show was just hit the ground running, and I don't know if that's a symptom of streaming, or kind of just weak writing, to be quite honest. But I don't know. I guess this show is one of these things where I think it had such a strong premise. The aftermath of a shooting sounds absolutely something that would be made for an Emmy sweep, right? I cannot say that this is an Emmy worthy show. Not that the Emmys matter, but what I'm trying to say is this show doesn't feel prestigious, right? This show kind of at the end of the day felt a little bit generic for me. And it's a shame because I think it had such a strong premise. It just had like a little bit of a wonky execution. Most of that is honestly because of the writing around the characters and some of the performances, specifically Brody, in my opinion. With that said, though, like I said, I'll still watch a season 2. Like I'm not. This is. You guys said this. I'm quoting you guys where where Mike, you said this was a net positive for the queer community, and I think you're 100% right about that. I think the steps forward that this took for queer representation matter.
Yeah.
You know, it sucks that I'm like kind of still disappointed with the show, but I will still watch a season 2. I will still support, mostly because like, you know, eye candy alone. But I don't know how you guys feel. Like, you know, is the show good? Eddie, do you think the show is good?
It's funny because like I've seen it and I had my reactions to it, and then like taking a step back from it and listening to you guys and your opinions, and you know, there's certain things that I appreciate a little bit more. Get an opportunity to reflect on. I'm definitely happy in the sense of that there are people like me on this show. You know, Latino, gay, complicated relationship with parents. You know that you see these things. So I definitely would want to see more. I really feel like, hey, just you threw a lot of stuff out there first season. Let's spend season 2 unpacking all that stuff and really exploring too. I think would be quite beneficial for the characters, see character development, and give us the opportunity to for us to fall in love or deeper in love with these characters.
Mike, Kyle, I don't know how you guys feel. Like, how would you classify the show? A good show, bad show, trashy, fun? I don't know.
All of those things. You said so many adjectives, and I think that they all apply. And you already quoted me. I think when I place everything on the scale, this ends up being a net positive show. I enjoyed it. I liked how deeply uncomfortable it made me in places. I liked how flawed the characters were, and I liked the pacing. I think it's a good show and net positive for the community, and I'll definitely watch season 2.
Yeah.
I think this is a good example for how to create a show, a queer show, because it used queer people to create it. They had they did not rely on one person or one consultant to represent every single person. Characters were fully fleshed out and flawed. They even the issues of the trauma, they had someone from that experienced Pulse come in and talk to them, and they had a lot of people behind the scenes that were consulting and working with the cast and crew, and everyone at least that I've seen was queer. So I think they're a model for how you, if you're doing complex things with and bringing a diverse cast, you do it in front of and behind the camera, and I think they're representing a new model for how we should make queer shows.
Kyle, you are 1,000,000% correct on this, actually, because oftentimes when we get queer representation in media, it's usually being told by like cis straight men, right? At least what they think we want to see. You're right. Like, this is a story. This is like a lot of the production crew behind the scenes was queer. I think they went out of their way to cast like actual LGBTQ castmates, right? Yeah. So, you know, like you're right, like 100% true. It's just like this is a work of art created by our community for our community, and my critiques of the show aside, I still think, it's just like this was still a worthy endeavor, and I think it is definitely worth the watch overall. Do you guys think as a remake or a reboot, this was needed? How do you guys feel about that?
I mean, Peacock is remaking everything, so if they're they're remaking everything, why not this one too?
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
I mean, this is my opinion, but remakes, they're just, we're remaking everything to draw you into our unique streaming platform, that now you can go see that thing you loved and get our streaming service. I think most remakes that are made are not needed. I don't think we need most of them. I don't think people are creative in remaking them. I think I don't know. I have a bad association with most of the remakes that happen. This one tried to create something new and evolve from the original, so I like that. I appreciate that they did that. Kim Cattrall made a right decision instead of going for and just like that.
Just
then
like
again,
that
Then again, she was also in How I Met Your Father, which was a very unfortunate remake.
Was she really?
She's the mother.
I didn't know that.
Boy, it's rough. I wanted so many good things for Hillary and Duff and Clinton, I guess, but Hillary Duff, and it just. Boy, I stopped. I wanted to love it, but I didn't. Anyway, so I'm so glad Kim Cattrall got a little bit of goodness somewhere, but I don't know. On the scale of remakes, maybe on the better end, but I still dislike remakes as a concept.
Yeah, you're sounding a lot like our usual co-host Nicole. She feels usually the same way. It's funny. We actually considered covering How I Met Your Father. However, the reviews are so terrible for it that we were just like, let's make us skip this one.
It's rough going.
Not the case with this show. Queer as Folk has a solid 88% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. The audience score, though, is divisive. It's 49%, which I understand, I think, a little. I think we can do a little better, but I think overall, I don't know if this remake was needed by name. I actually do think this show would be maybe a little bit more successful if it didn't have the connection with Queer as Folk, and it was like its own property, right? Where now I'm not judging it based on the past. I'm judging it on like this new piece of art. That is mostly my feeling on this show. I don't think it needed to be a Queer as Folk show. I think this show would have been absolutely fine just being an original show. Yeah. Eddie, how do you feel? Do you think this remake was needed?
I hate that question.
I know you do, but Nicole's not here, so you gotta answer.
I hate that question because I feel like nothing is needed when
It's
it comes
true.
to this stuff. I definitely feel it has a potential. I'm excited about what's it going to do next. What they're going to develop next. What I think is needed is a representation. What I think is needed is kind of like the story about our lives. And all its spectrums, kind of showcase and shown, in these stories.
Yeah.
So,
Filming in New Orleans also did make the show for me a little because I love the town. So I've been so many times, and I just love being. It's like, oh, I know where that is. I kind of know where that is. I think I might know where that is. But
Yep.
what about you guys, our listeners? Have you guys seen the new Queer as Folk? What are your thoughts? Let us know. Hit us up on Instagram. Our Instagram is Remakes Reboots Revivals. You can also hit us up on Facebook /Remakes Reboots Revivals. Give us an email. Our email is remakesrebootsrevivals@gmail.com. We also have a hotline where you guys can leave us messages. We love to hear from y'all. Our number is 862-248-2326. And you know what? While you're following us, be sure to show some love to our guests today. Guys, how can people find you?
Sure. Gayish is a weekly show about a gay stereotype each week. Episodes come out on Thursdays everywhere. We're on gayishpodcast.com, and we're Gayish Podcast on all social media.
Once again, guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
Truly, I'm a fan of your show, so like having you guys on was like dream come true, right? Because I think you guys are I read your blurb and all the successes you guys have had. So it's truly an honor to have you guys on our show.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
And guys, that is our closeout to Pride 2022. Please live your life out proud if possible, especially after the Roe v. Wade decision, because like I think now more than ever, like we're seeing some of our rights kind of on the brink potentially, right? So like we just want to make sure, just be loud, be proud. If you can be, I understand sometimes you just can't, but if you can, please go for it. And please reach out to your representatives, go out and vote, do anything you can. We have to win back the Supreme Court. I know this isn't a political podcast, but I'd be remiss if I didn't share my true feelings, guys. So with that said, until next time, stay unoriginal.